Hello and welcome to our webinar today looking at sit-stand working and how to make your purchase work. So my name is Stuart Entwistle. I'm training manager for Osmond Ergonomics. And the content for today, what we'll look into is just spend a couple of minutes just introducing Osmond Ergonomics and myself. Then we'll look at why we should be, or why we use sit-stand desks, how we should have them correctly set up, looking at sort of ways to increase movement in conjunction with the use of sit-stand desks, and then there's some free resources at the end. So my name is Stuart Entwistle. I'm training manager for Osmond Ergonomics. I've been with the business now 18 and a half years. So I started off delivering one-to-one training with end users who were receiving chairs and equipment from us. After a few years of doing that, I was keen to become an assessor. So I became an advanced DSE assessor in 2005, and to date have done many workstation assessments from your display screen equipment assessments through to escalated workplace assessments, where an organisation has carried out their internal assessment and they've asked us to come in to look at a specific area of that report. And we also get involved with carrying out assessments for disabled students going into university, which I think for myself and my colleagues is where we get a great deal of our knowledge from, because within the workplace, those of you who may be assessors who are on this webinar today, all the aches and pains tend to appear in the same sort of places on the body: the neck, the lower back, wrists, and quite often it's the cause of these are very similar. Whereas when you're dealing with a student with a disability, long-term medical issues, then the challenge to improve their study area is a lot greater and the rewards are a lot greater. In 2013, became training manager for Osmond Ergonomics and look after the internal training and delivering external training to clients that require it. So who are we? Well, we're Osmond Ergonomics, so we provide services and products to improve well-being and productivity in the workplace. We're based out of Wimborne, just outside of Bournemouth, but we have a national coverage. Anyone who you speak to within the business will have gone through 5 days worth of ergonomics training, so that would include a 2-day advanced DSE assessor course and a 3-day ergonomics in practice course. So anyone you speak to, whether it's face-to-face or on the phone, you can be assured that they've got the background knowledge to answer any questions you have. We have the Investors in People Gold. We're an approved organisation, a training organisation by the International Institute of Risk Safety Management, and we also have the other accreditations that clients often require. So, but we also do regular internal training days every 2 months. We look at topics that will broaden our knowledge, and it's not just about what new products are out on the market. Our training goes a bit broader than that. So we've done dyslexia awareness, mental health awareness, mindfulness, advanced driver training for everyone who has vehicles out on the road. So we deliver a broad range of training topics internally. So on to the topic for this morning then. So sit-stand furniture, understanding how to get the most from your purchase. So as I said, we'll start at the beginning and sort of why we should be looking at, or why sit-stand working. And actually, is it a new concept? Well, actually, it isn't a new concept. It's been around for over 100 years now. And as you can see by the images on the screen, these were found through Google. And as you can see, it's a sit-stand workstation going back about 100 years. But quite a slightly different sort of setup as to what we would come across today. But nevertheless, it's still a method of being able to sit or to stand to work. We've been selling sit-stand desks for over 25 years now. But I think the main change is that historically we've been selling sit-stand desks to individuals who have medical issues or have an injury. Nowadays, we're providing sit-stand desking to organisations who are taking a lot more proactive approach as employers look to look after the well-being of their staff. But this requires behaviour change, because when people don't have any pain or they don't have a disability, then that's tends to encourage people to adjust their postures and to stand for a few minutes. Whereas if we don't have anything going on, then we've got to try and get ourselves into better habits, and we can come on to that later on. So why do we want to look at sit-stand working to improve our well-being and our health? Well, Mother Nature designed us to be stood up and to be moving. We're not designed to maintain static postures for long periods of time. Pretty much most of us spend too much time sitting down. And if you're thinking, well, I probably don't sit down that much. If you examine your day, there's a lot of studies online that would suggest we can spend anywhere between 9, 14, 16 hours of our waking day seated. And you're probably thinking to yourself as I say that, how on earth can we spend that much time seated? But if we examine our day, we get up in the morning. Most of us will commute to work in a vehicle of some sort, whether it's our own car, whether it's on a train, the tube, a bus, and we quite often will be sat down during that journey. We get into work. Most of us tend to find the closest car parking space that we can find to the front door to our office. We go straight to our desk and we sit down and start working. We don't take enough breaks during our working day. A lot of us don't, or a lot of people I see don't take lunch away from their desk. We repeat that same scenario in the afternoon where we don't get up as much as we should do. Then we get back into the vehicle or for the commute home where we're seated again. And then when we get home, we probably sit down for the family meal, do a bit of housework, and then probably sit down again to watch the TV and unwind. So we can spend a lot of our time seated. And the research into the health effects of prolonged sitting identified that there is an increased chance of developing such things as, there's back pain, as an example, or an obvious example, but cardiovascular problems, type 2 diabetes, just to sort of name a few implications from maintaining sort of static postures or for sitting too long. And to sort of try and demonstrate the lower back issue, if you were able to stand up now while I'm delivering the webinar, if you feel where your lumbar spine is, put the top of your hand onto the lumbar spine, and then if you keep it there, keep your hand there and go to sit down, you'll feel the lumbar spine flatten. So we're starting to lose that lumbar curve in the spine, which is then starting to put pressures onto the muscles, joints, the discs, etc. in the back. And then quite a lot of us don't have a good posture when we're seated, so we may slump forward. So we're putting a lot of strain on the body, especially when we're seated. But we are finding, or I have found in my experience going out to sites, that they receive a sit-stand unit of some sort, whether it's a desk or an adapter, and then they revert from too much sitting because they've been told to stand up more, and they end up sitting for too long, so they go from one extreme to the other. If we stand for too long with no movement, then that can increase the chance of developing varicose veins in the legs, swelling in the lower legs and the feet, the ankles, maybe some lightheadedness. And there's also strain put on the lower back, the hips and the knees, etc. from sitting for too long. So, for standing for too long. So we need to sort of address that. And how do we do that? Well, let's go through and have a look. So first of all, we need to make sure that the desk is set up correctly, no matter whether you're sitting or you're standing. And I started off in this job, and I remember distinctly in my job interview all those years ago, my managing director, Garlsman, told me that I'd be teaching adults how to sit down. And I came away from the assessment thinking that's quite a bizarre statement to make. But he was correct. I am teaching people how to sit down correctly, but I'm now teaching adults how to stand properly, which also seems quite bizarre. But what we need to do is make sure that our desk is set up effectively. So we need to divide the desk into reach zones. So we have 3 reach zones on the desk. We have the first reach zone, which would be the space on the desk which our hands would cover when our elbows are at 90 degrees, our forearms are horizontal with the ground, and when we make an arc over the desk, that is where we need to put our items that we're using regularly throughout the day, so typically the keyboard and the mouse. If we outstretch our arms and then do another arc over the desk, we will create a second space behind zone 1, and that's typically maybe where you put your telephone, cup of coffee, the bits and pieces you're referring to sort of periodically during the day, or items you're using. And then the third space, which is the bit of the space at the back of the desk where you can't reach without stretching forward, that's where you would put your information that you need to refer to periodically during the week. So once we've got our desk set out correctly, then what we need to do is make sure that we're standing properly. So we need to make sure that we've got a good stable base. We make sure that our feet are probably about a hip or shoulder width apart, maybe 1 foot in front of the other to give us an even more stable base, and then have the knees slightly bent. We don't want to lock our knees, otherwise that has a negative impact on the circulation around the body, or around the legs and back up to the body. And then when we raise the desk up, we want to make sure the desk height is level with the elbows. So the same as when we're seated. When we're seated, we want to get our elbows just above the working height of the desk. So when we use keyboard or mouse, our upper body, our shoulders is nice and relaxed. The same applies to when we're standing. So when we're stood up, we raise the desktop up so that the top is about level with the elbows, so that when we're stood up straight and we're typing, then our shoulders are nice and relaxed. We're not going to be encouraged to lean forward or just lean on the desk because it's too high up for us. It may be necessary to, going back to the standing postures, we want to keep our ears above our shoulders, shoulders above our hips, to try and give us a good gait when we're stood up. It may be necessary to raise or tilt the monitor slightly, because if you think about how we're sat, we're slightly reclined in the chair when we're looking at our screen or sat correctly. When we're stood up, we're more vertical, so we may need to just tweak our monitor slightly so we can view that comfortably. Other considerations that need to be taken on board when we start out using sit-stand furniture is make sure that we're wearing sensible or comfortable footwear. I've seen or I've experienced quite a few occasions where people have come to me and they're complaining that their feet are hurting, and when we sort of drill down into that, either they're standing for too long or they're not wearing what we would class as appropriate footwear. You may find having a footrest under the desk is something that's going to be beneficial for you when you're stood up, because then you can just rest one foot on the footrest, so that we help to sort of reduce some of that lumbar curve or possibly excessive lumbar curve that we get in our lower back through standing. So just by raising your foot up, then you can help take some of the strain out of the lower back. But just beware that don't stand with one foot on the footrest for too long, because the foot that is on the floor, you're going to be putting a lot of strain through that leg, up into that hip and into the back as well. So make sure that we adjust our posture accordingly. So quite often the question comes about when we're talking about sit-stand desks is about how frequently should I move from a sitting to a standing posture. Now, it's not a binary choice. It's not a case of you either sit or stand. It's about sitting less, because standing for too long is just as bad as sitting for too long. So these desks are about giving users choice about how they have their desk set up for the activity that they're carrying out, or for how they're feeling. So we'll give some ideas in a minute about how you can sort of introduce movement into your day. And that's the sort of premise that we work on, is to try and think about the activities that you're doing during your day. So for example, I'm delivering this webinar now, and I'm stood at a sit-stand desk, and I'm standing to do the webinar, because for me, it feels like a more natural way of delivering a webinar, because this is how I would be, or I'd be stood up when I'm delivering live training sessions. So it just feels more natural to me. I'm also out on the road later on today, so that's going to involve some period of time sitting in the car. So I'm thinking about standing now so that I can to offset maybe some of that sitting that I'm going to be doing later on. Telephone calls, those sort of things, you deliver better when you're stood up. So think about what you're doing during the course of the day, and think, well, can I stand for this, or do I need to sit for this? But if you do need a time cycle to work within, maybe you want to set up a reminder on your computer, on your phone, to prompt you to stand up and then sit down again, then a 30-minute cycle seems about a sensible time cycle to work within. And what we mean by that is, after 20 minutes of sitting, we should sit or we should stand, for about 7 or 8 minutes, and then maybe move and stretch for a couple of minutes and then sit back down. So this is the image on screen comes from Cornell University, and this is something that they've advised. So it seems like a very sensible time cycle to work within. So I touched on just a second ago about ways in which we can increase movement, or look at movement during our day. And as I said, we don't want to sit or to stand for too long. We want to mix it up during the course of the day. So one of the things you can do to try and encourage yourself or staff to use the desk or the adapter effectively is, and it's something that we've implemented in the early days within our organisation, is that when we go home at the end of the day, as I mentioned, we can We can look at the tasks. So some are better suited for standing, like I mentioned, telephone conversations, maybe to sort papers and files. If you're going to send an internal email to a colleague, how about you get up and go and speak to the person instead, rather than just emailing them? We could use stairs rather than the lifts, if you don't have to go up too many floors. So those are sort of things that we can sort of introduce during our day for ourselves, whilst we're working, to try and get some more movement. Other ideas we can do, and not so much sort of work related, but generally some ideas to encourage movement throughout our day, is we could get out of the car, and if the weather's good, then we can look at walking or cycling to work. Maybe it's still not possible to do the whole journey on foot, or maybe by bicycle. Maybe if you travel to work on a bus or the tube or something, maybe you can get off a stop earlier. So then you just have a couple of minutes walk at the start of the day for you. Try not to park so close to the front door of the office, or maybe when you're out going to the supermarket or the shops. Park just slightly further away, so we actually increase some of our movement during the day. There's lots of fitness trackers, devices that you can wear on your wrist to measure how many steps you're doing, and you can compete with yourself. If you're quite a competitive person, then trying to improve how many steps that you do each day can be a fun way of increasing movement. And this is something that I did many years ago with the business. We went for a global corporate challenge where we had to record how many steps we were doing during the day. And at the start of the challenge, I was probably averaging about 2,000 to 4,000 steps a day. By the end of it, I was averaging about 8,000 to 10,000. So, and that's just got me thinking about how I would incorporate more movement into my day. Getting out of the office at lunchtime, going for a walk, or just getting some fresh air is a good thing for us to do. And then, if depending on the organisation you work for, maybe you can there are employee health programs, or maybe events going on which you can participate in to actually get some movement and improve your health. Now, there are ways in which the employer can help with this, and one of the ways in which employers can help get their staff to move more and to use the furniture effectively is to give good training, to make sure that they understand how to use their sit-down desk or their adapter appropriately, when to make changes to their posture, and also to explain what a good posture feels like, whether it's sitting or standing. Maybe if you're quite often in meetings, try standing meetings. It makes the meeting very effective. And something that we've implemented here over the last few years is to have walking meetings. Our office is at the end of a cul-de-sac. To walk down to the end of the cul-de-sac and back again, it's about a 15-minute walk. So when the weather's good, it's a great way of having those type of meetings which you need to brainstorm ideas. So it's a great way of making meetings more effective. Some companies that I've come across, they've had lift engineers in to slow down the lifts. And what happens then when we slow down lifts? We generally think that we haven't got enough time in the day to get things done, so we get frustrated. So what we do is we then take the stairs. So hidden ergonomics there. And very similar to how companies now are taking away waste paper bins, and they're having recycling points in one place in the office, and that encourages people to get up and go to the bin and get some movement. As I mentioned, Global Challenge is something that we've done. The link on the screen will take you through to the information, and it's a really fun way to encourage movement throughout your team. Depending on the size of the premise, you could create some walking routes around your office and your building. So if you've got some nice grounds around the outside of the office, then is there a way in which your employer can look at marking out routes? And then in conjunction with organisations like Step Jockey, they can actually work out how many calories will be burned. So if you have a couple of different routes, maybe a short and a long, then you can get an idea of how many calories or how many steps you're going to take in that particular route. And then incorporate regular training or health and wellbeing programs. So we've got Back Care Awareness Week coming up next week. So we're going in and we're offering workshops and trying to offer advice to staff about health and the such. So there's lots of ways in which you can try and implement this. And then again, there's some companies out there, a small minority, who will turn their workplace into a kind of a fun place. So we hear about organisations having slides going from one floor to another. So a way of just, to make it more fun, to encourage people to move. So those are sort of our hints and tips and the background to using Sit Stand and what we should be doing. There is resource on our website, and you can see on screen now there's an image of the Sit Stand advice that is free to download. But to summarize, what you need to remember is we're not designed to maintain static postures, whether that's seated or standing, for prolonged periods of time. We're designed to move around. That's what Mother Nature designed us to do. And there's studies coming out now to show that actually it's a frequency in which we change from sitting to standing postures. It's not the duration, it's the frequency of how often we do it during the course of the day that has an impact, a positive impact on our health and our well-being. So it's not a binary thing. It's not do I sit or do I stand. It's about moving and making sure that we move regularly throughout the day. So at this point, if you have any questions, by all means, type them in on the dashboard, and I will see how many questions we get and go through those. But while I'm just waiting for the questions to come through, we have some free resources available, as I mentioned, on our website, which are completely free to download and to use. So at our Osmond Group resources page, you can get posture guidance information about sit-stand advice, exercise and stretching. They're all free to download and to use. We have lots of organisations put this information on their intranet, so it meets their DSE requirements, and it also provides good health and wellbeing advice to staff. We blog regularly, and from the link there you can see our blogs from years back, and you can see the latest ones there. If you don't receive our blog and you would like to, from there you can register to receive the blog. It comes out on the second Wednesday of every month. And then we also have our training and events page, which is where you would have come to register for today's webinar. But we've got DSE courses running. We've got a product showcase coming up in Edinburgh, and there will be some more to go on there in due course. We're on social media, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I have a personal page on there, so if you'd like to connect, please send a request, be happy to link with you. But we have company pages on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. We try and find useful information and resource and put that out on anything to do with ergonomics and human factors. So a lot of information to be had there. Now, we don't seem to be getting any questions in at the moment. So if you do have any questions, because if you're anything like myself, the question will pop into your head as soon as the webinar closes in a minute. So by all means, drop me an email or contact me on the number above on screen, and I'd be happy to have a chat about any questions you have, whether it's about how to use Sit Stand, how to get staff to use it more, or whether you're looking at implementing Sit Stand and want some advice on that. I'm happy to have a chat with you, or anything ergonomics, to be honest. Our customer service email address and phone number on there, so if you've got any general questions, then they will be more than happy to help and more than able to help. So let's just have another quick look to see if we've had any questions come through. So looking at this, there's no questions coming through at the moment. So as I said, you have my contact details on screen, so I will send a copy of the presentation to everyone listening to the webinar today, out within the next 48 hours. A recording of the webinar has been made, so that will be available on our website, and I will email links out to attendees as well. So if you wish to view it again, then it will be available to watch again. So, okay, just checking the chat once more. No questions coming in. So we're coming to the end of the half an hour webinar. So what I will do is I will sign off now. I wish you all a good day, and I hope to have you on some of our future webinars, or maybe our face-to-face training. Okay, many thanks.